bringing the people behind our food to life.
Food sovereignty it's an idea that was developed by an international peasant movement called La Via Campesina. And what La Via Campesina, this is a movement of 150 million farmers, landless workers, campesinos, and they're around the world, including here in the United States, including, in fact, some groups who are fighting the slavery in southern Florida that we were talking about a minute ago. Now that they have a vision of bringing democracy into the food system, and what they want is not for the free market to provide or for government to provide, but for us to get round the table and discuss for the first time in history how it is that we want our food system to be. Because we've never really had democracy in our food system. And so what they're talking about when they talk about food sovereignty, I mean, there's a long definition, and if anyone's interested, Wikipedia is the place to go for it. But the short version is that food sovereignty is about a community's, state's, or nation's right to be able to shape their own food and agriculture policy. Yeah, and when you look at that, it doesn't look terribly potent, right? I mean, the right to be able to shape your policy. It's really about a right to have rights over your food system. But if you take that seriously, the idea of a right to have rights, it doesn't make sense unless we have a guarantee that those rights will be fulfilled wherever those rights obtain, whether it's at an international level or even in the household. And one of the things I talk about in the book, the way that capitalism operates today, it demands a subsidy from women in particular. It demands a subsidy from nature, as we talked about, the $200 hamburger, but it also demands a subsidy from women's work, particularly women's work in the home. Of the $17 trillion, of the world's total GDP, if we imputed a dollar value to women's work in that GDP as they did in 1995, you'll find out that women's work is unpaid and yet contributes to more than half of the total output of the world economy. And so that's important to note, because when we come to think about food sovereignty, we need to think about women's work, about the fact that, for example, in developing countries, women grow most of the food that is eaten in developing countries, and yet they receive, that they own less than 10% of the land, they receive very little in the way of remuneration. And so what's interesting when we're talking about food sovereignty is the latest slogan in food sovereignty that Via Campesina has. And that slogan is this, that food sovereignty is about an end to all forms of violence against women. Food sovereignty is about an end to all forms of violence against women. Now that's wild, right? Because we started here talking about, well, we want control over the food system, and we end up here saying that food sovereignty is about an end to all forms of violence against women. How do we make that transition? Well, Via Campesina, in its very practical struggle to transform the food system, to bring democracy to the food system, has realized that at every level there's the inequalities of power that accompany gender. And that's not just talking about domestic violence, that's talking about the violence that means that you can't send your daughter to school because she is needed in the fields, or you can't sell your products on the open market because the market has been concentrated in the hands of a few people, or the market for your product has been wiped out by food being dumped from Europe or from North America. So this idea of food sovereignty is really about what it is that we need to happen in order for there to be democracy in the food system. And that means democratizing not just the home, but all the way up to the World Trade Organization. But that gives you a sense of the scale of what it means to be democratic. I mean, and there are no easy solutions here, but there shouldn't be any easy solutions. This is a very difficult problem. It's one that we've spent several hundred years getting ourselves into. There's no quick turnaround, but there are many ways in which the food movement can offer a way out by following these principles of food sovereignty that I think I certainly am very excited about.
So the United States is a real champion of food sovereignty and that whole movement.
Well, of course, the United States government really isn't. And the tragedy is that the US government has been exporting the so-called free market model very aggressively around the world. Of course, Haiti is the most tragic example of that, where Haiti grew the majority of its own rice, but because of US foreign policy, the economy in Haiti was intentionally made subservient to US food. so that now the rice in Haiti all comes in bags saying gift of the people of the United States. It's a profound tragedy. But I mean, luckily there's a difference between the US government and the US people, and that's a good thing, because I am now a US person, and I absolutely don't think this government represents me, but I do think that what I'm seeing in terms of food justice, the struggles to bring food to communities, particularly communities of color, but in fact communities of hungry people in the United States, is tremendously inspirational. And I'm very excited by that element of the food, of U.S. food organizing. And it's very interesting. I mean, at the end of the 1990s, overseas, the U.S. food movement was really a laughing stock. There wasn't much of a U.S. food movement that anyone could point to and could get excited about. But really, over the Bush years, over that decade, while many other things went to pot, the food movement really grew, and grew in a really exciting way. And I mean, I think the U.S. food movement is a sort of beacon of hope around the world, and I get very excited by that.